What if Indian literature wasn't just a reflection, but a battleground for identity? That's what Homi K. Bhabha calls the third space. A zone where cultural meanings are negotiated, not imposed. Indian fiction doesn't simply represent the nation, it questions it. It breaks identity into pieces and rebuilds it with complexity. Writers like Salman Rushdie, Arundhati Roy, and Amitav Ghosh use English. The language of empire is to tell local, layered stories. According to Gayatri Spivak, this is strategic essentialism. Speaking from the margins to confront the center. These voices create subaltern counterpublics, and the result is hybridity, not just in language, but in structure. Myths, oral traditions, and non-linear timelines blend with Western narrative forms. Now pause. What happens when this hybridity moves to film? Adaptation, as Linda Hutchin explains, isn't copying, it's reauthoring. Think of The Guide, The Namesake, Padar Panchali. These films reframe the original text for new audiences and new contexts. Marshall McLuhan would say the novel is a hot medium, a kind of full of detail, while film is cooler, demanding participation. But Adorno and Horkheimer warn us that mass media can turn art into entertainment. Yet in India, adaptations like Haider and Omkara complicate that. They subvert mainstream readings, embedding caste, regional politics, and violence. That's what Stuart Hall calls a negotiated reading. And Laura Mulvey's gaze theory reminds us the camera itself becomes a political tool. These films reverse the gaze, interrogating power rather than just reflecting it. So whether on the page or the screen, Indian literature doesn't just adapt. It challenges, it transforms, it creates new spaces where culture, politics, and identity collide and converse. From the colonial past to the post-colonial present, British literature has remained deeply entangled with India. Not merely as a place on the map, but as a space filled with spiritual, political, and symbolic meaning. What if India was never just a place? What if it was a metaphor, a mystery, a mirror? From 17th century verse to 21st century novels, British literature has long imagined India, sometimes as a jewel, sometimes as a ghost. Let's begin with Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress, 1681. The line, "Thou by the Indian Ganges side," shoots rubies, find, places India at the edge of time itself, distant, opulent, and endlessly romanticized. John Milton's Paradise Lost, 1667, mentions Agra and Lahore of Great Mughal as part of history's grand arc. Even in Eden's Fall, India appears, framed by imperial awe. William Blake's The Book of Thel, 1789, leans toward mysticism, echoing ideas that resemble Vedantic thought, the soul, illusion, and impermanence. William Jones, a British Orientalist, writes Hymn to Ganga in the 1780s. It praises India's sacred river in English verse, reverent in tone, yet filtered through a colonial gaze. Robert Southey's The Curse of Kehama, 1810, turns Hindu mythology into a Christian-infused fantasy. India becomes a symbolic and moral landscape. Lord Byron in The Giaour and the Bride of Abydos, 1813, uses the East to explore passion, violence, and doomed love. The Orient is blurred, seductive, and emotionally charged. Thomas More's Lalla Rookh, 1817, imagines India through royal journeys, mystics, and desert songs, a fairy tale written for the British drawing room. Then comes Wilkie Collins's The Moonstone, 1868. A stolen Indian diamond, a haunted English estate. The past refuses to stay buried. Tennyson's Akbar's Dream, 1892, speaks in the voice of a Mughal emperor promoting religious tolerance. But it does so within the safe limits of Victorian ideology. W.B. Yeats in The Indian Upon God, 1889, fuses Irish mysticism with Indian philosophy. He sees India as a spiritual counterweight to modern decay. Flora Annie Steele's On the Face of the Waters, 1896, tells the story of the 1857 rebellion from multiple perspectives, British and Indian. A rare attempt to humanize both sides. Kipling's Kim, 1901, shows a boy moving between colonial identities. Kim is Irish, raised in India, and trained to spy, a symbol of empire's double face. Lawrence Hope's The Garden of Kama, 1901, creates imaginary Indian love lyrics. Though written by a British woman, they echo with longing and loss, wrapped in Orientalist beauty. T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, 1922, brings in the Ganga, Himavant, and Upanishadic wisdom. As the West crumbles, India becomes a voice of thunder and renewal. Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, 1922, traces the spiritual journey of a seeker in ancient India. Through samsara and nirvana, it celebrates inner peace over material success. E.M. Forster's A Passage to India, 1924, explores a friendship between Aziz and Fielding. The Malabar Caves echo silence, suspicion, and the broken promise of colonial harmony. George Orwell's Burmese Days, 1934, critiques imperial cruelty. Though set in Burma, its characters echo India's colonial tensions, especially through the eyes of Dr. Veeraswamy. Jim Corbett's Man-Eaters of Kumaon, 1944, blends hunting adventure with ecological respect. The jungles of India are alive, sacred, and dangerous. John Masters' Bhovani Junction, 1954, follows Victoria Jones, caught between Indian roots and British identity. Her struggle mirrors a country on the brink of change. J.G. Farrell's The Siege of Krishnapur, 1973, turns colonial pride into satire. During the siege of 1857, British illusions crumble in absurdity. Paul Scott's Staying On, 1977, shows Tusker and Lucy living in post-independence India. They stayed after the empire left, lost, nostalgic, and unsure. Zadie Smith's White Teeth, 2000, brings the story into modern London. Through the Iqbals, his culture's legacy lives on, in food, memory, migration, and identity. India in British literature is never one thing. It is sacred river, ancient wisdom, seductive mirage, and historical wound. In every line, India speaks, sometimes misheard, sometimes mythologized, but always present.